Hello, and welcome to Basketball by Association. I am your host, Reginald Arky Shea. That is Joel C. Cordes. Joel, we are ready to talk some National Basketball Association off-season discussion news, aren't we not?
We are. I enjoyed your NPR intro from the honorable Reginald Arky Shea.
He is honorable.
It's our first full, true off-season edition. The NBA draft is past. We won't do too much with that. The kind of dust is already settled, but we're right in the thick of free agency, which is starting here on Thursday. We've got some trades happening, a lot of rumors flowing, new coaches. Of course, Kyrie's in the headlines, and this is episode 112, Arky Shea, and we get to name it after one of my favorite unsung players from the 80s and 90s who, man, his career was derailed on the second half by injuries. He was never the same player, but you know what? He won 5 NBA championships on the second half of his career. He's a guy that scored over 18 points per game 7 times in his career. He was on the 86-87 all-rookie team when he scored nearly 23 points per game. And here's going to be the dead giveaway. Michael Jordan and his entire production company should be flat out ashamed for the way that they failed to mention this guy except as an opponent on The Last Dance. You and I have talked about him before, and you know it ain't Luke Longley, because Luke Longley didn't average 18 points per game 7 times in his career. You want to take a guess who we're talking about here?
Who was hurt?
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
That Jordan dissed. Oh man, I forgot. I mean,
he was the starting backcourt mate with Michael Jordan, and yet Michael Jordan couldn't seem to remember that he started for the whole three-peat, the second three-peat, right alongside him, and was a pretty big deal because he was oftentimes the second, if not third best defender on that team. I know I've put you in the memory crunch here.
Crap, I don't remember. Did he mention? No, he didn't. Because they talked about. Okay, so I'm trying to think about what was discussed in the documentary, what was shown versus what Michael Jordan actually said. Well, he mentioned Steve Kerr, right?
Right, and Kerr wasn't a starter with him. This is the Ron Hollywood Harper episode. Put up points. Yeah. Go back and look at the box scores. Go back and look at the numbers from the first 7-8 years of his career with Cleveland and the Clippers. He was never made an all-star game, which is really bizarre, but he was a fringe all-star every single season till he ran into some knee injuries, wound up signing in Chicago, and then became a defensive guy instead.
I've had a wild day already to start before we're recording, so I was trying
That's what I figured.
I knew Steve. I couldn't remember off the top of my head how much, if at all, Kerr started.
Right, and they did thankfully talk about Kerr quite a bit.
But I was trying to remember back because I haven't gone back and watched any of that documentary since it actually aired the first run. Have you watched it since?
I have actually. My parents had not seen it, and so we watched it over the last year here.
Does it hold up?
Times. Yeah, a couple of times when they were there, and I mean, it held up the same. Nice memory, journey down memory lane. Right. Got you some stories that you didn't know on a couple of topics, and absolutely left you wanting more in a not great way. But Hollywood Harper, 5 seasons in Chicago where he won 3 rings, and then 2 seasons with the LA Lakers where he also won 2 rings.
Harper was probably going to be my second guess, but I was trying to think through the discussion of Steve Kerr on that and where Steve Kerr actually was comparable to that lineup you were talking about as one of your clues. So, they did. Michael did kind of do him dirty, didn't he?
Yeah. The only time we saw him a couple of times in the background as if he were a tree, and scenery. And they talked to him one time, and that was about and
I remember that being a big
Cleveland
discussion
Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers-Bulls rivalry. We got one quote from Harper, so it's not like they couldn't find him. It's not like he was on the other side of the world, which was the excuse they gave with Luke Longley. because the pandemic was going on and apparently Zoom hadn't been invented yet, so they couldn't talk
Apparently.
to him to do an interview. But
All
whatever.
right. So this is the Ron Harper episode. All right.
Mhm.
I'm excited for it. I don't want to sprint by the NBA draft just for a second. I just want to say that you, as a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, I just want to say something that I said to you via text out loud.
Mhm.
I think you're going to like Walker Kessler, who you got. He's the former North Carolina commit who ended up transferring to Auburn. I just think that I think you're going to like the way he plays and how much he actually cares about defense. I don't know if they'll teach that out of him when he gets to Minnesota or anything, but like he's a guy that is a. I liked him because he was so good at positioning himself in the right way without getting in foul trouble, getting all those blocks when he was leading the country in the block with blocks. So he's a good body control type guy, which I think is key when you want to become a really good defender, especially at that high level. So I just wanted to say that I think you got a pretty decent one to watch for the next few years.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that because Minnesota's got offense to the nth degree, right?
Yeah.
They didn't need another guy who could score, but they do need defensive help, despite the fact that they've got Patrick Beverly, they've got a couple other guys, Torian Prince resigns now, who are helpful in that department. But the more defenders, the better when you can put those around Karl Anthony Towns, especially, and D'Angelo Russell to help them on that end. I just want to say with the first 3 picks, I thought it went perfectly for all 3 teams. Chet Holmgren to the Thunder, we talked about a little bit prior to the draft about how that was a great fit. There's not a lot of pressure for him to develop. They have so many other picks that they're swinging on that if they strike out in some way, it's not going to be the end of the world. I like Paolo Banchero, however you say it, to Orlando. You kind of talked me into him as maybe the number 1 pick over Jabari Smith. And looking at the polish and the low post, skills that he brings, I'm really excited for that. On the same side, I've seen Orlando waste so many front court guys, so many high picks over the last couple of years. I don't know where this leaves Jonathan Isaac. I think it leaves Mo Bamba on a different team. We'll see what happens there. And then the Rockets taking Jabari Smith. I really like that because of the stretchiness that Jabari Smith has. And I didn't know that much about him either. But his ability to stretch the floor, I think, works perfectly in a way that Banchero might not have if he had fallen to 3. For their guys like Kevin Porter Jr. and some of the other young guys who want to get to the basket, who want to play in that mid-range. So I was really happy with the way the first 3 picks went. The rest of it, I know a lot less about. We're going to know more as we get to see these guys in Summer League. But it seems like this year there were very few like absolute misses where people were just left completely scratching their heads and going, oh, no, that was stupid. For the most part, even if people didn't like the picks, you could talk yourself into why said team made that pick.
Yeah, like that's. Well, I'll talk about this when it comes up with another discussion in a minute, so I'll save that. But I do find it very fascinating that I think we can start our free agency sort of discussion here with this. I think Houston has set themselves up to be a lot more competitive, a lot quicker than I think most people were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they were able to get a Jabari Smith at number 3, you knew they were going to get one of the top 3 players, but they were able to hold back and get who I think is the overall best player of the 3 in the entire NBA draft. They get him to fall to them at 3. They don't have the Christian Wood contract, and now they don't have the John Wall contract as they bottom out. And now they have a tremendous amount of space to be able to sort of make any kind of pursuance if they would like.
Plus, it's almost a given that they're going to move Eric Gordon, so you're gonna raise some other cap space there. Dennis Schroeder most likely isn't going to return. So you talk about a starting 5 of Porter Jr., Jalen Green, probably Jayshawn Tate, and then Jabari Smith and Alperen Şengün, who played really well. And not to interrupt you, but I mean, you're right. It's the starting 5 plus a clean slate behind them. Oof.
I think the clean slate is a huge deal. Plus, you have a team that gets to they get to do what sort of Phoenix got to do, right? Like they get to grow together for a couple of years. And then if you feel like you're close, you can make a play for a bigger name, a more veteran name, someone you think that could sort of be a glue piece, so to speak, that would be able to help you. But I think the way Houston handled this, and the jokes are made that, John Wall played 2.5 games and 25 years there at Houston and whatever the exaggerations were. I think it was like 40 over 3 or something. Like, it worked out for them. They got out from under the contract. They got it out for a little cheaper than what they probably were even expecting. And they got a whole bunch of young talent, and they got they had all these draft picks to sort of play around with, right? And then they also cleaned up some cap space, and now they're ready to, I think, as long as they try to play it correctly, I think they've at least started by playing it correctly, knowing that you got to tear this thing down to the foundation. You know that there's a one or two pieces that you really like already on the team, and let's start, being smart with some of these draft picks, getting lucky, I think, with Jabari Smith dropping down to you, and let's build up because we got a couple of really good players right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, they pick up Boban Marjanovic in the Christian Wood trade, which immediately makes them the league's most likable team, and it means that Boban has now officially played for all three of the Texas teams. Not many guys can say that.
That's right. That's our Texas guy. Officially, the Texas guy, his first name is Boban. Isn't that great? I would kind of hope it somehow it would have happened in where like a Chet would have done it. But I guess a Boban works just as well,
I mean, just shorten it to Bo, and you've got your Texas guy, right?
Okay.
You got your Texas
Thank you,
guy.
Joel. Look at you. You are my yang to my yin. Yin. Yeah, yin yang. We are the twins of yin yang. The one story I've been disappointed by this offseason so far is the news that Kyrie Irving is opting in to fulfill his commitments to Kevin Durant and to the Brooklyn Nets. And the Brooklyn Nets, who very publicly and privately said to him, we're not giving you this giant contract that you sort of are expecting. And they won because there were teams sniffing around Kyrie. Right, the reporting is like the Mavericks were interested in Kyrie. Of course, it seemed like Knicks were interested in Kyrie. I'm sad that the Knicks aren't going to get a chance to have like a transcendent type player on their team with this. We'll talk more about the Knicks in a minute. But the Kyrie opting back in with Brooklyn, I don't know if you're Brooklyn, Joel. Are you pumped about that?
I am, and if I'm Kyrie, I came to my senses a little bit because the interest around him was not going to be what he wanted. The ability to make a trade to somebody like the Lakers or the Heat or, a place that he might want to go to chase a championship or whatever it is, those teams were not going to put big assets on the line for a guy who, was in and out of the lineup for all of those personal reasons. And that's what they were. They were personal reasons for the last few seasons, plus the way that things ended in Boston, the way that things ended in Cleveland before that. So many red flags, and yet Kyrie played really well when he was on the court last year. So this is perfect, I think, for everybody involved. Everybody. Kyrie needs to get back on the court, play the entire season, play well, take the Nets as far as they can go. If it works out, Durant's going to want to stay. Kyrie's going to get his bag. A lot of this is going to be forgotten if the Nets play up to their potential, and they will be in the hunt again this year. If they flame out, but Kyrie still played well, he will have opened up his free agency possibility enormously because he will be seen as a valuable player who has put some of this baggage behind him. The only things that could really derail this really badly is if Kyrie gets hurt because he's had injury issues before, or if he starts missing games again for personal reasons and is difficult to deal with. And we know there's a decent chance of that happening. But were that to happen, now all of a sudden he is not under contract. He's not a trade asset at that point. And he's going to find his free agency list, while still available because he's that talented, is going to be muted in the money department. So I think he knows that. I think it's time to play up to your potential. It is every definition of a contract year. And if you're the Nets, you moved heaven and earth to make this happen. And you still do have Ben Simmons. And you're going to see what you can get out of him this season after losing James Harden, who you spent a lot to get. So put those three, Durant, Simmons, Kyrie, together, rebuild the roster around them. You've got some interesting pieces that are there already. See where this goes. And you don't want to lose Kyrie for nothing. You don't want to lose him for 30 cents on the dollar. you don't want to see KD depart and this experiment be a complete and utter failure.
I do think it's sort of fascinating that Brooklyn was able to sort of call Kyrie's bluff, and there wasn't another team that got dumb enough to go crazy into Kyrie. Despite the amount of talent that Kyrie has, no one was willing to say, all right, Kyrie, here's the moon. Take it. Go wherever you want with it. Like, everyone sort of said, listen, you've got quite the track record, and we understand your talents, but we also know that we can't fully trust you. And maybe some of that came starting with the offseason. Maybe they had some feelers run around, and you started to see these comments come out about Kyrie where he was, quote unquote, a little more humbled than what he sort of was expecting, going back and saying, hey, he was a big reason why the ending with LeBron happened. It was not just because LeBron wanted to shove him out or anything like that. So it is sort of fascinating to sort of watch that maybe, just maybe, Kyrie's had a chance to take a piece of that humble pie for, at least a few weeks in the offseason. But we've seen it before, and then he come back out. What was the quote that he said yesterday?
It just made me roll my eyes and go, this is where it gets tricky, because it's not red flag 1, 2, or 3. It's like red flag 10. And even though he'll say the right thing and do the right thing, then there'll be these little things that come through. And it was something like, normal people make the world go around, but it takes an exceptional person, exceptional people to advance society or something like that. And I was like, dude, I am absolutely not one of these people who's like, shut up and play ball. I think that's ridiculous. Use your platform. However, what? Like,
you're testing Joel's, Joel gives a lot of leeway to players. You're testing it. I just feel like you're getting to about the end of the rope that Joel liked to get.
The amount of ego in that statement, and where you consider yourself in the pantheon of current humans in a topsy-turvy world in need of exceptional people. Kyrie, you do not have the bona fides to pass that here. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So let's just move on. Let's just file that away under red flag number 11, and the exact reason why teams are not going to hand him a max contract, nor give him the moon, which may be flat in Kyrie's world.
Well, let's go to max contracts, as it looks like Jalen Brunson is looking for one, and it looks like your freshly adopted New York Knicks are very interested in Jalen Brunson. In fact, they made moves on Tuesday, Tuesday, that secured even more cap space by moving Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel off the roster. Joel, as a freshly minted New York Knicks fan, what do you think of the idea of bringing Jalen Brunson in to be your top guard?
I love the idea of bringing Jalen Brunson into a lot of teams. I think only the Knicks and the Pistons would have been desperate enough to hand Jalen Brunson a max deal.
Whoa! You use that desperate word. I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, Jalen Brunson is a good player who rose from.
He is. Let's start with that. He is from
an afterthought to a solid starter to a guy who was routinely putting up 20 points per game. He's got a decent outside shot. He's got a nice first step. He is phenomenal, especially for a player his size in the post-up game. He's a willing passer, but not a guy who actually gets a lot of assists.
He averaged like 5 last year. He's all right.
Yeah, and again, the ball was in Luka's hands more often than Jalen Brunson. So there is some room there to jump up. Defensively, though, on that undersized level, he battles. I look at Jalen Brunson, and this is what I see. I see a version of Kemba Walker. I see, what Kemba Walker used to be. Kemba Walker getting to the hoop a little bit more, Brunson doing the post-up game a little bit more, but similar in stature, similar in output, decent players. But with what we saw in Kemba and with Charlotte, was he a max contract player? Yes, but to a team like Charlotte who really didn't have any other stars or much else going for him. Okay. Is he a max contract player to somebody like New York? Maybe right now.
Yes.
But do you want your 3 max contract guys to be Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, although Randle may or may not be in the future picture, we don't know. I'm not sold on that as my big 3. And again, Brunson is a solid player.
Scare you?
We've seen a lot of players and a lot of teams that were a bad match for each other because said player did really well in a contract year and blossomed and then got the bag. And within a year and a half, said team that was desperate to hand them that money because they needed to spend it on somebody, and this looked like an up-and-coming player, all of a sudden a year and a half has major buyer's remorse because said player is decent, but not max contract level player. Look at the Atlanta Hawks and John Collins, for example. John Collins, solid starter, might make an all-star team once or twice in his career. Not a max contract guy, not a multi-time all-star, and I'm sorry, that's where I see Jalen Brunson.
All right, well, that's the new money talking over there with the Knicks fan. As the old money, let me say you're way off on this. Way off. Jalen Brunson is a franchise player. And I
really believe that?
And I mean that as in he will play for a franchise next year.
Can you give me the straight Arky take? No facetiousness whatsoever.
All right.
Do you really truly believe that he's worth near max money or max money?
Yeah. But here's the thing: I think the Knicks are in a terrible position, and it's not the first time or the last time I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's because the Knicks, what Jalen Brunson's coming in to sort of be the replacement of, he will look 100,000 times better, right? Like Derrick Rose and Kemba Walker, and I know Kemba's already gone, but Derrick Rose, they're old.
Emmanuel quickly.
Yeah, he's going to look miles and miles and miles better than them. But that's not necessarily saying a ton, you know what I mean? So, you have someone who's going to come in and be more effective, I think, night in and night out, someone you can trust more often throughout the season. I think pairing him with a Julius Randle, and I do think they should keep Julius Randle. I think he is a very good player. He's fiery, he's high-headed, he's interesting, but I think over the last 2 years, he's gotten himself into a lot better shape, and he's played a lot more consistently, and he earned that new contract that he got at the end of last offseason.
Sure.
Whether or not I think they're a big 3 or they're close to being sort of that team, no. I mean, I think Jalen Brunson makes the Knicks a better team, but the question I have, the two things for me is simple: is Jalen Brunson going to be a guy that Tom Thibodeau can work with and likes? I mean, you talked about the physicality in the post that Jalen Brunson is, and he's a bigger guy, and that sort of seems like something that Tom Thibodeau would like. But will Jalen Brunson, 8 weeks into the season, think the sort of same thing of the grind they'll have to deal with? And 2, I feel like the Knicks have given away a handful of second round picks during all of this stuff too, and it's just the second round picks allow you to make mistakes in the draft, allow you to be sort of able to try things.
Yeah.
Unless you're in, let's just say, the top 18, 17, 16, roughly in the draft, you're not getting someone that's changing your entire franchise. It just, for the vast majority percentage-wise, it just doesn't often happen. So the Knicks are in that weird middle ground of you're competitive enough. Last year, 2 years ago, the playoffs. Last year, just on the outside. You're in that sort of weird room where, unless you make a trade up for a spot or you have someone else's pick, you're probably not, as a franchise, currently going to get someone larger than a Jalen Brunson to come be able to try to clean things up for you to make you sort of competitive in the future. But, do you just want to tear it down again?
That's a fair that's a fair point, and we'll move on from the Knicks here because we got other trades in a second. But also, in their defense, In addition to everything you just said, the point guard market in free agency is not great this year.
Oh, it's awful.
You've got guys like John Wall and Ricky Rubio who, yes, could be helpful and would have been upgrades over what they had, but not needle mover upgrades and have dealt with injury issues. You've got some, backup guys like DeLon Wright, Dennis Schroeder. Same thing with like Rajon Rondo. Those are not going to be upgrades over what you had. That would have been moving laterally. There are two guys who are restricted free agents who maybe if I was the Knicks would have taken a run at, but I know time is of the essence and you don't want Jalen Brunson to leave. Brunson is the better player out of these three, but you would have gotten these other two with very similar production, I think, to what Brunson is actually going to give you for a lot less. And that would have been taking a restricted free agent run at Collin Sexton, see if the Cavs match, and then same thing with the Blazers. Anthony Simons, I would have taken a look at there. There is one guy, though, who I think actually would have been much cheaper, given you the money to spend elsewhere, and would have run your point guard position in exactly the type of way that Tom Thibodeau would have wanted. And the dude just never makes mistakes. And that's Tyus Jones, who's been the backup from the Memphis Grizzlies. He's unrestricted. He's been that backup, over the last couple of seasons for a very, very, very good Grizzlies team. And, obviously for John Morant. And every time Morant has gone down, Tyus Jones has proven that he can be a starter. No, he is not sexy like Jalen Brunson. He's not going to put up the points that Brunson does. But if I was the Knicks, I might have looked at that. And the cost benefit analysis would have been a little bit more intriguing to me than Jalen Brunson, but I understand everything you said, and they want that clear upgrade, and you got to spend for it. Unfortunately, you are buying at the top of the market for Brunson, if that's the case. But we've got other trades to talk about.
I was going to say, just the good thing for Brunson is just that it's all about timing, right? The timing for him working out really, really well.
Absolutely.
So who else you got on your list that you're interested in talking about?
All right, well, trade that just went down before we went on the air, the Nuggets and the Wizards swapping a couple of role players, but being that the Nuggets have been, a near contending team, this could be a big deal for them. Monte Morris and Will Barton, who both have played big roles over the last couple of seasons, go to Washington for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Ish Smith. Smith, if he suits up for the Nuggets, this will be his 13th team in his career and would be the NBA record. He's tied with like 5 other guys for a dozen teams.
Oh, you got to root for that.
It's possible. So this one is a little weird to me. Monte Morris kind of became expendable with Bones Highland playing so well at the backup point guard spot while Morris was injured a lot last year. Will Barton has been given a chance in Denver over the last few seasons and has shown that he can be a scorer. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, on the other hand, is like a 3-and-D guy who doesn't quite give you the same amount of offensive punch, but is definitely more of a defender. And I think that's where Denver was going with this. Ish Smith may or may not even make the roster. We'll see. And if he does, it's going to be as the third point guard. But it's interesting to me to see Denver kind of admitting that they're not good enough defensively.
That's where I was going to say it. Like that. That's all. That's all. When I heard that, I just thought they clearly they're focusing on defense. They have to they've got to make upgrades there. That's the mission right there.
Yeah, and knowing that offensively, if they're going to get Michael Porter Jr. back healthy and Jamal Murray back healthy, that they're not going to need a Will Barton even to come off the bench necessarily to give them points anymore. Because again, Bones Highland was scoring pretty well with that second unit, and the ability to bring Jeff Green off the bench, who kind of has resurrected his career with Denver. If they keep DeMarcus Cousins, he showed he could put the ball in the basket. So this is a nice, sneaky, under the radar move for Denver. We don't have to spend a ton of time on it. If I'm Washington, I'm actually a little bit geeked about this because I won this trade outright. I got the 2 better players out of the deal. It's just that Pope, who is a veteran at this point, and remember, played on the Lakers when they won a championship, Pope just fits better with what Denver needs. Washington may not keep Morris, may not keep Barton, who are both kind of mid-career guys, but now you've got some trade assets to deal with. So that's the first one I want to talk about. Timberwolves re-signed Taurean Prince. I'm cool with that. I wanted to pick your brain real quick because the Knicks made a deal last night, sending out Nerlens Noel, Alec Burks. Basically a cap-clearing move so that they can go after Brunson. Are either of those guys going to be missed in your mind much?
No, those guys weren't much on the court. Like Tom Thibodeau is this guy. Is one of these guys that finds out really early on, like in camp early on, who he's going to trust and who he's going to deal with, and then that's it. And so, for Nerlens Noel, who I like a lot, I think he's a fine player. No, he wasn't, not under Tom Thibodeau, wasn't going to do much. So yeah, you clear some space, you try to make a run for a Jalen Brunson. I understand that for exactly what it is.
We got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to quick hit a couple of these other decisions or pending decisions, and I'm going to pick your brain on these too. Ivica Zubac re-signs with the Clippers for 3 years, $33 million. Love that deal. Love that deal.
Yeah.
Starting center, you got him for a decent price. It's not max 5-year type of thing. He's been solid for them. They've got their money stashed in other places like Paul George, like Kawhi Leonard. Now they're bringing John Wall in, so we're going to see them retool. But here's the question for you, Arky. 3 years, $33 million. Are you prepared, if you're the Miami Heat, to essentially give practically the exact same deal to PJ Tucker to return, who is 37 years old, and reportedly we're doing a fully guaranteed 3-year, $27 million deal? Like, PJ Tucker has earned his way into the league. He has been super valuable on contending teams, but really? Are you cool with that? I'm not.
No, I'd have to grin and bear it if it just sort of turned out that that's the way. Ugh. I don't usually like to pocket watch guys like that, but man, that is, age-wise, that's a lot of commitment for someone who's up there. It's a lot of commitment, and no disrespect to PJ Tucker. He is, like you say, he has fought his way to be a
and has hardly missed any games with injury. We'll say that, up to this point, but 37 is 37.
Right? You're not getting away from 37. Yeah.
Will Hardy becomes the head coach of the Utah Jazz. The only reason people know Will Hardy is you saw him on TV a whole lot, standing next to Ime Udoka during the Celtics run. Will Hardy has been an assistant for a lot of really good coaches, but just 34 years old. Does this sort of thing with a young coach signal a rebuild with the Utah Jazz? Do you think they blow this up, or they just move Rudy Gobert this offseason and try a different look around Donovan Mitchell, a la what the Portland Trailblazers attempted to do with Lillard last year?
I think it sort of signals a little bit of a rebuild. We see it happen in Houston, for example, right? Where, they sort of just, they had a couple of players and now they're like, no, we're going to start with a new coach who we like. We hope he turns into something along the way while we're doing this. To me, it signals I think they'll be fine if he works out, right? I don't think they're going to argue with it. And they didn't get him just for nothing. They got him off, they got him with a pretty decent pedigree. Mm-hmm. But I do think this sort of signals that Rudy Gobert, the signals are already out there, but I don't think Rudy Gobert is a part of this team anymore.
The Cleveland Cavaliers give the qualifying offer to Collin Sexton. Suns do the same thing, or reportedly are going to do the same thing with DeAndre Ayton, meaning neither of those players are getting their extension right now. And both of them could become unrestricted free agents next year, or might get some whales of an offer here this offseason. Which of those teams, Cavs or Suns, is making the bigger mistake here? I think I know where you're going.
It's the Suns. Listen, there's no one more consistent of those two than DeAndre Ayton. And consistent as in really, really good consistent. To sit there and just try to lowball your way out of this, I hope he finds someone that gives him a boatload of cash and forces Phoenix's hand, because this guy's a star.
It might not be this year unless somebody magically clears the deck, because the one team that was supposedly in the market, the Detroit Pistons, have already made some moves which have gobbled up that cap space. And on draft night, some of the players being brought in, it doesn't look like there's so much of a need there at center anymore. So Ayton may have to do a prove-it year.
But you know what this does, though, by the way? Not only gives you that prove-it year, it gives you that, hey, do I have any incentive to want to re-sign with you even if you give me big money next year?
Correct. Now, again, the Suns could come back and offer that extra year and more money, and that might be enough for Ayton. We'll see. But, yeah, something brewing in the desert there. Real quick, the Charlotte Hornets, Miles Bridges, it's reported, may not get the max contract offer from Charlotte, who, like Phoenix, has been a team kind of notorious for lowballing guys. Remember, they didn't want to give Kemba a max extension, and that actually worked out pretty well for them in the long run. If you're the Hornets, do you give it to Miles Bridges? I absolutely do in this case. Yeah. I look at Bridges the same way you look at Ayton and see a guy who has not hit his full potential yet, unlike somebody like Jalen Brunson, who I think did kind of max out where he's going to be.
Yeah, and Bridges is giving you long stretches of like elite level play that like you should reward the guy. He's clearly earned it.
And no surprise, John Wall had opted in and then, got bought out. Russell Westbrook does the same thing, $47.1 million to return with the Lakers. Arky, you're a betting man, so to close out the show, what are the odds that Russell Westbrook is in a Lakers uniform next year, that we don't see a buyout, that we don't see a trade, or, the Lakers arranging for alien abduction or something just to get him off the roster?
I'll say they may still have to pay the cap hit for the alien abduction, but I think you won't have to worry about him on the court.
They're not cheap. Alien abductions aren't cheap.
That is true. Like, you have a middle guy you got to pay because you can't just know a guy. I'd give it probably 40% chance that I think he's back with the Lakers. I think that's just such a massive contract to undertake. I don't know how you're going to be able to clear him off and then not want to at least have part of his services too. I don't know. That's just a huge chunk of just dead money if you just want to just not play him or cut him or whatever. Like, it's just, I think there's a pretty good chance he's still in the Lakers next year.
We'll talk more about Russ and the Lakers coming up on our next show, I have a feeling. And, there's going to be plenty with free agency opening Thursday. There's going to be plenty of news, rumors, and all that good stuff. So episode 112 is in the books. You can find it on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes if you want the audio-only version. For the video version, it's the YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. Arky Shea, the honorable, venerable Arky Shea. Thanks so much, man.
It's Reginald. Thank you, Reginald Arky Shea. And thank you, Joel.
Anytime, my friend. We'll see you.